Hey, have you ever created a static site like a landing page, a blog, or some custom static data? You might have found that it's a little bit hard and annoying to do. What I wanted to show you was that there's a project that makes this a lot easier called Content Collections, and it works with Svelte, React, Vue. Today I'll show you how to use it with Svelte. So the cool thing about it is it's really fast to set up. It supports markdown, json, YAML, and you can even add your own parsers if you want to. And it's fully type safe. So you'll have autocomplete. You can define all your attributes with data types, and it gives you TypeScript type definitions. And you can reuse it between multiple sites. So if you want to copy, let's say in a year from now, you create a new site, you can copy and paste a lot of the structure over, which is kind of handy. So I'll walk you through setting it up. The first thing you want to do is you want to install all the packages, and I'll also install Zod because for schemas. And then in your Vite config, what you want to do is add the Content Collections Vite plugin. And in your Svelte config, you want to set up an alias because all the generated code ends up in Content Collections folder. So you can set up an alias for that. And that generated folder, you probably should add that to your git ignore as well. Now let's define the schemas that we need. So let's say we have our blog site that'll have multiple authors. So what we'll do is in our content collections.ts, we'll define a collection for authors. We'll tell it which directory to put that data in. We'll use JSON in this case, and then we'll define a schema that says name, title, bio. Those are the fields that we want for an author, and then we'll export that collection. Cool, so now we could create an author. I'll create one inside the content authors folder. And now on to the next schema, which will be our blog posts. So we'll define another collection called posts. We'll put this in the post directory. And this time we'll use markdown instead of JSON. And then we'll define the schema for the front matter. So we'll say we want a title, a summary, date, author, tags, and then we'll export that as well. Cool, so now we can create our first post. And you see that the front matter has the attributes, and these are all typed. So if we're missing them, we'll get an error, which is really cool. Okay, now we're ready to create the UI. So let's create the UI for the /blogs. This will be like a listing page. We'll have a load function, which will take in all posts. So we'll import all the posts, and then our load function will sort the posts based on the date and time, in descending order, and then we'll return that to the UI. So our UI will look something like this. We'll bring in that data that we just defined in the load function, and then we'll iterate through the posts. We'll show the post data, and then we'll make it linkable. So you can go to link to click to an individual post. Cool, so that looks something like this. So that's already working, that's kind of nice. But you'll notice there's one problem. If we inspect this, we'll see that the link only says /blog. It's missing the ID field. And that's because in our schema, we never defined an ID. We want to use the file name as the ID. And that's no problem. We can customize the schema with what's called a transform function. So if we go back to our schema for posts, we can define a transform function. This will edit the object to add in an extra field called ID. So now we'll transform the object, we'll return the new object that has an extra field called ID, and the ID uses the meta path. So that's the file name without the extension. Okay, cool. So let's try it again. And this time, if we inspect, we see now that we have the correct URL with the ID, which is the file name. Okay, so now we're ready to build the UI for the blog post page. So that'll look something like this. Again, we'll import the all posts data, and we'll define a load function. It'll take params because notice that our path has a param ID in it. And we'll want to extract the post by looking at all the posts and finding one where the ID matches. If we don't find the post, then we'll raise an error for not found. Otherwise, we return the post to the UI. And so our UI looks like this. We pull in the data, we extract the post, and then we can data bind directly to it. And this is all typed. And we can even put out the content of the markdown file. Okay, and this will look something like this. Now you'll notice that there's a problem that it's outputting markdown and not HTML. So we can solve this by adding some extra logic to our transform function. So if I go in here and I look at my transform function, for the posts, what we'll do is we'll use the compile markdown to compile the the markdown content into HTML, and then we'll add that to our return data. So basically we're returning a new object with the extra HTML attribute. So now our post has post.html, which we could then use inside our page. We can update it. Instead of content, we'll use post.html. And now if we look at our UI, we see that it's no longer outputting markdown. Now this is an actual h2 tag. So it's outputting HTML. Awesome. But now there's a small other problem. You see here that it's using the author, which was defined as a string, but I'd really like to use the full name from the author object. So I'd really like a way to connect the post with the author objects and join them into one thing. And so again, we can do that in the transform function. We can put in some logic that will look at the author document and try to map the post with the author. If we have no author, we'll throw an error. Otherwise, we'll return the new post with extra attribute for author. And then in our template, we can now use post.author.name. So we have the full object of author, not just the key. And if we refresh our UI, we see now that it has the full name. Sweet. So I'll leave you off with one last tip, and that is that in GitHub, you can actually set up a CI workflow that will validate the schema. So this way, if somebody opens a PR and there's bad data in it, you won't be able to push it. And I can show you an example of that. If I go to this project on GitHub, and let's say I was to go into the content, I don't know, for one of the posts here, and maybe I'd make an edit, a bad edit. So I'll remove the title, which is a required field, and I'll commit the changes. I will create a new branch, propose changes, create the PR. And now you'll see that the CI is running here, which is going to check the schema. And there you go, the schema check failed. If I look into here, I'll see that validate content failed, and I can see the logs. All right, so there you have it. If you don't mind liking the video, it does help the algorithm. And of course, if you'd like to see more of these, hit subscribe. All right, catch you in the next one. Bye.